Hello everyone, welcome to From the Star Wars Home Video Library. I'm your host Nathan P. Butler, and this is our third of those top whatever videos as we find ourselves without a lot of new Star Wars home video content being released so that we can still continue with more content for the show. We're looking at annoyances from the perspective of someone who is a Star Wars home video collector, someone who is seeped in this Star Wars home video community, doing the show, doing the book, right? And just some of the things that are frustrating in the community. And fair warning, my econ teacher day job self will come out as part of this. Let's dive right into it here. We are doing 5 for each of these, so this is our top 5 frustrating things being a Star Wars home video collector, at least in my personal experience. Feel free to add your thoughts on stuff that has frustrated you down in the comments. And for what it's worth, this is specifically about the collecting process. If it was something specific to, the Disney product line, the 20th Century Fox product line and stuff like that, we've looked at that before in those previous videos. This will also not address something like, well, they just keep reissuing the same stuff over and over again, because that is kind of the nature of collecting, whether we're talking about home video collecting, reissued action figures in the action figure collecting market, and so on, book collecting and different printings. That's just kind of the nature of the beast, so that is not going to be one of our topics here. So, we will start with number 5. 5. I need like an effect or something, don't I? Number 5 is bootleg reporting and how big a pain in the butt that actually is, because most of the time, you really can't do it. Right, so if you're a Star Wars home video collector, typically, at least in my experience, most lean towards official releases. There are some, quite a few, who will pick up bootleg releases, or bootleg items, not really releases, bootleg items to put in their collection because they find them interesting. They know they're not legitimate. They know they're bootlegs, but they get them anyway. That is their choice to get those. Now, there's an ethical question as to that, depending on where they're coming from and what's being paid, or are they just being handed off, are they being downloaded? A whole other thing we're not going to get into right now. My concern is the reporting side of things. If you see people who are selling bootlegs on eBay, good luck getting a report to do anything to get that taken down. The same thing with Walmart and Walmart.com's website at times now, because they allow people to sell third-party stuff on there. Amazon with Amazon Marketplace. Amazon with Kindle Direct Publishing, which used to be CreateSpace. I have the example here that stands out in my mind, and I mentioned this in the book, and I've mentioned this, I think, previously in an episode on this particular bootleg. But there was a bootleg where somebody basically just, back when the Ewok telemovies weren't on Disney Plus yet, and the last DVD release had been in 2004, and they were getting pretty pricey for whatever reason out there, the actual legitimate ones. So somebody basically took the cover art and scanned it, cropped it a little bit poorly. They took the double-sided flipper disc and ripped the content of each side, created a somewhat poorly done photoshopped label to put on each disc, and then put that up on CreateSpace/Kindle Direct Publishing to be sold through Amazon, listed as ships and sold by Amazon because it's through their self-publishing service, and started selling that bootleg on Amazon. A few people were drawn in by it. I was like, wait a second, what is this? Went ahead and picked up one specifically to try to figure out what it was. Was it a release that just never got mentioned, which was unlikely, or would it be something that needs to be debunked? Debunked it on the show here. But you try to report that to Amazon, nothing, right? In most of these cases, the only way you can report something as a bootleg is if you yourself are the copyright holder. So I guess you would have to reach out to Disney and be like, hey, somebody's bootlegging your stuff, and Disney would be the one to have to request to Amazon to get it removed. You can't just say, hey, this is bootleg, this should not be being sold illegally here. It just doesn't work. It's basically the Wild West, and as it has grown, Amazon, eBay, and all have grown, it's even less policed now than it was, say, 10, 15 years ago. So it's, again, a buyer beware type of thing. You would hope that you could help other collectors by trying to make sure that they're not running into bootlegs that might look like legitimate items. But if they don't disappear from those marketplaces and the marketplaces are unwilling to police them, people are still going to run into them. So the only way you can deal with that is education, which will come up in one of our other topics here. I would also note that at least on Amazon, if you try to post a review on something that is a bootleg, noting and warning people that it's a bootleg, not legitimate, they will tell you that since your review is not about the content of the bootleg, the movie they've bootlegged, but instead is about the fact that it's a bootleg and the legitimacy of the product, that does not count as a review that is on topic and it will not be posted. How's that for some bullshit? Now the next two kind of fit together, so I'll kind of address them bit by bit here, but they do kind of have a lot of crossover here, and this is where my econ teacher self will come out, and that is, starting at number 4, inflated pricing of home video items now thanks to the grading process. All of a sudden, it's become a thing that home video items are now going to be graded by a small number of outfits as if they're comic books or trading cards. And I'm sort of torn on this idea because on the one hand, I mean, basically as an econ teacher, it's hard for me to say that grading is a bad idea. Does anybody give a crap about the grading? Maybe some people will, probably the vast majority will not. Is grading something that is sealed as a home video item practically a good idea? Depends. If you're never going to open it, you're not going to care necessarily what's inside. But you could very well get something that is a graded VHS cassette, but inside the cassette is molded. But if it's in wrap, or if it's been put in some kind of protective case and graded, would you know what the inside is like? I would also say that typically grading should be usually limited to things that are actually limited in quantity, right? Like you could find excellent condition, sealed, say, DVD releases, and even some VHS releases, for instance, of the Star Wars films on eBay, not inexpensively, but at a decent price. Whereas there's no need to grade it because, I mean, what are you doing? It's the same condition. You're just paying for the fact that somebody has officially said, yup, it's nice looking. But at the same time, this is a free market society for the most part, right? We're a mixed economy leaning more towards capitalism than anything else, than command or anything else. And in that sense, if somebody wants to pay to get something graded, even though it may be meaningless, I guess more power to them. If someone wants to try to sell something that is graded and try to sell it for an inflated price, I guess that's okay, because in essence, it's just a separate little niche market, right? There's the market for the item, and there's the even more niche market for someone who wants a graded version of that item. And that's just plain old supply and demand, right? There may not be a lot of demand for it, but as long as there is some, and people are willing to pay those prices, it's a fair transaction, presumably between those individuals. Supply-wise, you know, the suppliers put it out there. If they're only willing to part with it for a certain amount, that's where the supply line is, okay. I would just sort of mentally separate that, though, from the market for, like, regular stuff, right? Regular releases versus graded. I would also say that grading should probably only be done on the stuff where it would really matter. I wouldn't necessarily grade something where it's ubiquitous, right? So why would anybody want to grade it or pay for something that's graded when they could get a very good or even excellent condition copy otherwise? But as stupid as it can be, or as frustrating as it can be, as, to me, kind of useless as it could be, I can see why some people would be drawn to that. So, okay, more power to them. What is not okay is manipulation of that, as we have seen in instances where companies who do that type of grading are basically doing a shell game type of thing, where they have somebody that they're in cahoots with basically buy an item at an inflated price as their way of justifying future inflated prices. And allowing people to justify inflating prices of non-graded copies by looking at eBay and being like, see, this one sold for like $1,000, even though it's so common it should only have sold for like $50 at most. Well, by manipulating that market, you get that type of in econ we call it an externality, right? A side effect coming out of it. So, in that sense, that's what I have a problem with. It's not grading in general, though I think it's kind of dumb for home video stuff. And it's not that people are buying and selling graded stuff. Again, I think it's kind of meh, but there's a market for it apparently. But purposely manipulating that market, that is where I have an issue. Because that is not actual fair trade. That is not actually showing people what the market value is of this graded item relative to a market that's actually out there. That is essentially falsifying market results. And that is some crap. And that brings us basically to a related topic, which is number 3, which is bots and scalpers. This, particularly in home video from a scalping standpoint, tends to lean towards things like steelbooks and things like that. The limited edition stuff where you know it's going to sell out, that kind of thing. And I think this is another one of these where it's not one aspect of the practice, the broader practice, that gets me as much as the cheating to make that practice more profitable in an illegitimate way, or what I see as an illegitimate way. So, econ teacher hat on right now. Scalpers are always going to be a thing unless prices vary more than they do. Okay? Let's take a Star Wars action figure product line. Let's say there's 10 action figures in a product line. Typically, what you're going to find is that for ease of customer understanding, for ease of stocking in a store, that whole product line might have the exact same price tag. Let's say it's a $20 price tag on every one of those items. I don't know what action figures cost anymore. Let's say $20 for each of those 10. But maybe in that product line, like 8 of them are available at retail anywhere, and 2 of them are exclusive to a particular store. Or maybe 8 of them are reissues of figures we've seen before and 2 of them are new. Or maybe 8 of them are meh characters like Constable Zuvio, the perpetual peg warmer, but the other 2 are like, the first Ahsoka based on Rosario Dawson, or the first Din Djarin figure with his helmet off or something, right? Things people are really going to want. What you find is that across a product line, there is different demand, sometimes different supply even, in terms of like the exclusivity and limited numbers and stuff like that. But there is a distinctly different demand, oftentimes, for products within a product line, right? A reissue of a figure that's come out over and over again of a figure who maybe isn't one of the major characters is going to have a lower demand at the time of release, typically, than something that is a limited edition figure or a popular character, a character who's never had a figure before, a brand new mold for the figure, etc., right? So even though that product line is all priced the same, it shouldn't be. From an economic standpoint, a purely economic standpoint, it absolutely should not be that whole product line has the same price, ever. Because if there's going to be different demand for each one, to simplify it, right, you have supply and demand, right, when it comes to economics. You have demand that if you've got, and I'm kind of looking at this and trying to think of how this would look to you. But basically, so I won't do the left and right thing. So you have like a vertical measurement of price. You have a horizontal measurement of quantity. And the demand line slopes downward as you go from left to right, because as prices fall, people are willing and able to purchase more of something. Supply line is the exact opposite, right? It slopes upward from the starting point on the left, because typically the more that a seller or a potential seller can get out of selling something, the more willing and able they are to sell that thing. You put those together, it looks like an X, essentially. And there's only one point on that X, only one price, vertically, on that X, where the quantity on both lines is exactly the same. That's what they call the equilibrium point, or the market clearing price. At that price, the quantity that is demanded and the quantity that is supplied of that item is equal. Meaning there is no surplus. There's not a bunch of them just sitting on the shelves not being sold or sitting in old inventory not being sold. There's also no shortage. People who want them can find them and buy them. Okay? There aren't a bunch of people going home angry because they can't find what they're looking for, even if it may not be at that location, just being able to purchase it, in the general broader marketplace. If you are in a situation where you are constantly pricing a high demand item below where that equilibrium would be, like you're saying, we're going to price all these at $20, even though this particular item has such a demand or is in such low quantities out there on the market because it's exclusive to somewhere and limited in number, that it actually should probably sell for more like 70 instead of 20, but we're going to price them all at 20 just so it's a uniform product line price. You are guaranteeing a shortage every single time, because you are putting your price below equilibrium where the quantity demanded will exceed the quantity supplied every single time. If you do not allow the prices within a product line to float or to adjust or to be set differently based on demand and based on supply, then you're going to see that happen. Same thing with like the Constable Zuvio thing, doing it the opposite, right? There was not a lot of demand for Constable Zuvio, but it was out there as part of the supply. and just kept being churned out. So what happens? You get a massive surplus of Constable Zubio. It's sitting there on pegs for months or years without being sold, right? Same kind of thing. You don't want your price set too high or too low. You need it at equilibrium to clear the market in a society like ours. So, that being said, scalpers will continue to exist. Because in essence, the items themselves are not being priced correctly by the initial retail seller. So it makes perfect sense for somebody to show up at Target the day that a new set of figures get released, or to set up pre-orders for new steelbooks coming from Zavvi, or from SM Life Group, or from Nova Media, or from Blue Fans, or from whomever, and immediately put in pre-orders to buy more than they actually would need for themselves, knowing they can make a profit by turning that around and selling it on, say, eBay, where it actually is more of a supply and demand fluctuation, right? If the price is too low, people will bid it up. If the price is too high, people won't buy it, right? It is much more of just a standard supply and demand thing happening on the secondary market, like on eBay, especially where it can be bids taking place. And yeah, they're gonna sell for more than they did at retail. And you might say, well, yeah, you're a bastard. You came in there, you got them before I could get there, and now you're selling them for higher because that's what they will actually sell for in this market, not the original too low retail price, you know, from an economic standpoint at least. But at least in that case, you had a fair shot of getting it just like they did if you had got to the store right when they went on shelves. It is not their fault. Again, there's a morally gray area big time when it comes to scalpers, but at least it's not their fault that they got there before you did because they were there when Target opened and you did not. You were not. And they are essentially doing what the market demands, which is that these sell for higher. In essence, if you get it for the retail price, you lucked out because that is way lower than the market value of that item. Whereas if you get it on the secondary market from someone on eBay, what you're paying may be quite a bit higher, but it's probably closer to what that item should have been selling for in the first place had they differentiated the product line by supply and demand for the items. Econ teacher stuff. But while scalping itself can suck based on what you expect the price to be as a consumer versus what you might actually wind up paying, even though, again, Econ 101, that in and of itself is sort of adjusting to a failure of the market initially, and the pricing initially. What I cannot abide is bots and shit like that. And people who show up at Target not on the day something is released to buy whatever it is as soon as it's on the shelves, but who go to Target ahead of time and talk to one of the workers and be like, hey, don't even put these out on the shelves, bro. I'll give you a kickback. Sell them straight to me from the back. Don't ever let them hit the shelves. Because that, or a bot that does the automatic ordering online, like what had happened a lot with PlayStation 5s and whatnot, or a bot doing the buying, rather than a human being waiting until it's actually released and then actually using human reflexes to buy. That stuff, to me, that is the unethical aspect of it, right? That is the undermining of the actual market process that is supposed to be there for that particular item. If it's meant for retail sales, it should hit the shelves. If it's meant to be ordered online by people, it should be ordered online by people, not by bots and things like that. Because that, in and of itself, is, again, kind of like the people gaming the grading stuff, right? They don't allow it to be a fair marketplace at the start. They rig it, and then it goes from there. And it happens so fast, especially with the bots, that it really is sort of more like rigging before there's really any chance of a free market to do much of anything about it. So that, I would say, is a big one, and it's only going to continue because, you know, companies are not very good at dealing with bot issues. And retail store employees oftentimes don't really have much of a head for what's going to be popular and what's not. So if somebody comes to you and says, you know, help me get this ahead of time, be my hookup, I don't know that many employees would necessarily feel a moral obligation to say, no, I'm going to wait till it's on the shelves. Unless there's like a policy specifically involved, and then that's not a moral obligation, that is a I don't want to get fired obligation. Okay, so no more econ hat. Econ hat is off. No more econ teachery stuff. And again, I know that my view on those two are distinctly colored by my econ teacher day job. I know there are some who will vehemently disagree with me on certain aspects of those points. Remember, I'm looking at it from an economic perspective primarily, and how our system is supposed to actually work. That brings us to number 2, which is not nearly in need of as much explanation as the other ones did. No big econ thinking. It's stock images. Screw stock images. If I am buying something brand new, particularly if it's something that's just been released, a stock image is fine. But if I go on eBay or Amazon Marketplace and I am looking for an item, especially on eBay, and I'm looking for an item that is out of print, that is used but it says it's in good shape, whatever it might be, I want to see the item I'm buying. Okay? I don't want to see a stock image that tells me what it should look like, especially if it's just an image of the cover art without even showing what the packaging itself should look like in the broader sense. I want to know what the item is that I'm buying from you. Show me a picture. It's not hard to do, especially if you're using the mobile app for eBay. Put a picture with the item. If you say, like new, I expect it to actually be like new, but I don't really trust that. I want to see it. Show me a picture. And if you request to see a picture of something that is shown as only a stock image and the person refuses to do so, run. Because that is not a seller you should want to do any kind of dealing with now or in the future. So to me, stock images, particularly on eBay, right, where it's all secondary sales for the most part, really, really irk me. And generally speaking, I will avoid buying something, even if it looks like it's cheaper, from a stock image type of listing on eBay than if I can see a picture and it does cost a little bit more. I can think of only one instance where I did not do this in recent memory, I think, but it may have even been an image of the product, but I didn't really care as much. And that was right when Black Widow came out in Japan on the Ultra HD pack that includes the Blu-ray, UHD Blu-ray, and Blu-ray 3D disc that wasn't even released in the UK, and I wanted that package. There were a lot of listings that showed stock images, but it was brand new, and these were basically like orders of people who just got the stock, trying to put them up on eBay. I think in that case, the decision was made more by the fact that this one was already in the US than ordering from one that was located in Japan rather than stock image stuff. But generally speaking, stock images, no. I didn't use stock images in here. Stop with the stock images. It's lazy, and it's not friendly to the consumer. And if you sell something with a stock image and it turns out that they wind up trying to return it or filing a dispute because it's not as described, that's on you, seller, because you didn't show them what it actually looked like. Which brings us to frustration number 1, which is actually why I wrote the book. And that is a lack of information. There's just not a lot of websites, not a lot of places devoted specifically to Star Wars home video stuff. There are more now. Chris Clark has the great StarWarsHomeVideo.com now, where he's slowly cataloging different formats that he's based out of the UK, but kind of across the pond, being able to show that kind of stuff. And now I've written a saga on home video first and now second edition, right? But the reason why I felt compelled to even write the first edition of the book, in part, was the fact that there just wasn't a resource out there for that type of collecting. You can find collector books about Star Wars in general that might include home video stuff, but it's almost never even trying to be comprehensive. Not a lot of info, just like the name of the product and a picture, maybe, for some of them. Like the Star Wars Super Collector's Wish Book does that, and more power to them. I'm glad they included it all, but there's not much to it. Full disclosure, for one of the editions of Star Wars Super Collector's Wish Book, I actually did an article in the back about Legends continuity timeline stuff, before anybody says, wait a second, why'd you mention that? But there's just not a lot of places to get that info. Whereas, like, if you collect the Star Wars action figures, there's all kinds of resources you can go to for that. Star Wars books and comics, especially comics with variant covers and whatnot, there's all kinds of places to go looking for that. And while you'll find that in the movie industry and home video industry, there's a lot of places to see reviews of items, tons of places to see a review of the latest 4K release of a Star Wars film on home media, to actually find a guide to the home media genre in and of itself, whether it's region-specific or not, there's just not a lot out there. That's why, when I started, I was thankful as heck to find swonvideo.com, which is now well out of date, but it was a great starting point for me. Davis DVD, I believe at one point, had sort of a catalog going of some of the really early stuff. There just wasn't anything, so I leaned into eventually writing the book, which is now the 3-volume color set that came out here in the last week or so on Amazon, paperback and Kindle. But that irks me. That's my biggest frustration over the years as a Star Wars home video collector, is that if you don't find the information yourself, your only real option is crowdsourcing in like the Star Wars home video Facebook group, because there's just a dearth of information out there for this particular subgenre of collecting that I love so much, but that in the broader community doesn't seem to be something even usually thought of as collecting. I don't know if I mentioned this. I actually proposed for the one celebration that I was going to. And granted, this was right before A Saga on Home Video First Edition was published, so there wasn't an ability to say, see, I wrote this book on this. It was like a matter of weeks before it was actually going to come out. But the celebration in Orlando back in, it would have been 2017, because that's when the book came out, the first one. I actually proposed a panel on Star Wars home video collecting to have something that wasn't just the same old crap, the same old topics that you see all the time. It was shot down. No thanks. There are bigger, more important topics in collecting to address, but feel free to propose it again some other day, when that was, the one celebration we'll probably ever wind up going to. So it's just, it's a great little collecting community, but it is definitely not one of the major Star Wars collecting communities, and as a result, there's not a lot of information out there for those who are trying to collect, and that has been an ongoing frustration. And imagine in my shoes, right? Not to single myself out, or I'm not saying this in like an egotistical sort of way, but someone who is interested in getting into it now, they can look to this, right? That's why I created it. For me, if I don't have that information, I've got to turn to the home video Facebook group, and if they don't know, I'm kind of out of luck and having to just sort of like hunt and hope that maybe I can research and maybe find some information on some obscure website about whatever it is. It's incredibly frustrating. So yes, our top 5, as I look back on my phone where I've got it listed, in case you're wondering why I keep looking down. So bootleg reporting and the inefficiency of that, and the fact that usually it does nothing. Inflated pricing coming from grading, primarily not because of the grading itself, but because of how people are gaming it. Scalpers, but not specifically scalping in general, but the bots and sort of the unfair starting point, stock images, and the lack of info out there. Those all, as Bib Fortuna would say, of the day's annoyances these. Or I guess I should say, of the years of collecting annoyances these. And again, if you have frustrations from your time as a Star Wars home video collector, feel free to drop them into the comments as well. Thank you for watching, and may the Force be with the home video viewers.